Hello and welcome back to the Native Drum. I am your host, Shawn Littlebear, and today on this episode, episode 3, we are going to get into making a large drum. We had a lot of people that have requested that they've seen some of the smaller drums and they saw the big rim and they wanted to know and to see how to make a big drum. So what we are going to do is we're going to jump right in. We're going to make a 28-inch by 12 travel powwow drum. So right now what we're going to do is we have some natural hide that has been soaked in cold water, and we're going to go right outside and start cutting the hides for our 28-inch powwow drum. Here we are with our rawhide. We have it soaked in cold water, and when you wad it up and you don't hear it crunching and you can make a fist, it's ready to go. So we have both sides soaked in cold water for a day or so, and now we're ready to cut the rawhide, the sides, and make 2 faces for our powwow drum. And we've got one side ready to go, and what we're going to do is unfold it and look for marks. They're called range marks, parasite holes, brands, the knife marks that inevitably that you flesh the hide with. There will be some of those, and we want to make sure that those thin spots aren't going to be anywhere near where people are going to be hitting the drum. So you want to move your hide around and check the different places. See, there's a thin spot where the knife mark is, where its skive mark is. It's cut into the hide, and then we place our drum rim on the hide right where we want to place, where there's enough room where you can make the holes and stretch the hide over their frame. And after you go through, you want to always adjust. If it's a cloudy, you want to look at it through full sun and make sure that you're cutting it right exactly where you want to. Make sure your tools are really nice and sharp, because you don't want to be fighting your skin once you start to cut. Always measure it 3 or 4 times, maybe more, and then make your cut. Because you can always go back and trim, but you can never go back and add to it. So, and then the little pieces you'll have for other projects or for your lace. So out of a couple of sides, you'll have enough for the lace. What I do is I cut with the skin side facing up, and always make sure that your hide stays wet while you're working with it. And account for the thickness. The thickness is going to vary. Usually it's thicker up by the shoulders of the animal, and then it gets thinner as you go toward the hips or the haunches. So your face will be thick on one side and thin on the other, and you want to clock those opposite, top and bottom. So once you get through the thin spots, once you find your range marks and where the hide is going to stretch, the thin spots are actually going to get thinner as they pull apart. So keeping that in mind, you visually make an inspection, and then you cut both of your heads to fit those in. So here we go, we're cutting our last head, and we have enough for the lace, and we'll just go and round out the corners, cut off the tips, and we'll be ready to cut the lace and make the drum. Okay, now we're back inside after we have cut the round out of the skin for our drum head. I determined that we needed to figure out how to space the holes, and to do that, I decided from the chunk that we had for the lace, I wanted to determine how much lace we could get out of that, and we had plenty. There was more than enough skin left to do the lace out of. So I got to do a really nice 1-inch lace, and that should be about the spacing between the two holes in the set. So we're gonna lace through these holes, and this part should be about equal to or greater than the width of the lace. So taking that into account, I went around, and normally I do 16 sets on a smaller drum, but because this is a bigger drum, we can move to the higher sets, which are in symmetrical patterns. They go from 16 to 24 to 32. 32 would be a little bit more than I wanted, because I'm going to use a big enough punch to get our lace through the holes without it actually damaging or cutting the rawhide as it goes through. So that's the reason why I determined the spacing. Once you determine the spacing and the size of your holes, then you can determine the number of sets that you want. Or if you want to just do one hole and pull the lace through one hole. Again, you have various options, but because this is a southern drum, I'm not going to do a single tie, I'm going to do a double tie. Just like we did in the previous episode on the smaller drum, I had sets of holes made for the small drum on both ends, and then I started my lacing through, and then I went back around again to tie off the drum and then to tighten it up and make the heads nice and tight. So basically that's the same thing we're going to do here, except we're going to do it in a bigger fashion. So in determining the number of holes, what I've done is I've taken a set of, if this was just plain and I did my first set of holes and said this is as wide as I want them to be, I take a yardstick and go straight across the pattern, and then I would flip it over, and then where my set of holes is on this side, there would be a corresponding set of holes on the other side, which would be this set. So wherever that crease is, when you fold your round over, you put a set of holes there, and then you would do the same thing across and do a set here and a set here. So once you have 4, then you can do a set in between the 2 holes, and you have 8 holes, or 8 sets of holes. And then to make it 24, between those 8, like this is one of the 8 holes, this is one of the 8 holes, I would do 2 sets between the 8 all the way around. So it gives me 24 sets of holes. So 48 holes altogether. We've already done our other drum face, so this is the face that we're working with now, and these are the last 2 sets of holes that we are going to punch. One of the reasons why I kind of pointed that out is you'll notice that some of the sets are a little bit closer together than others. Others are a little bit wider. And you need to take into consideration that some of these sets of holes are going to encounter anomalies, like this thin spot that's here on this side of this hole. What I did was, when I started out with my original 8, I moved this one to this side of this thin spot. There's a little mark on the other side of it. And what I want to do when I punch the holes in the skin is I want to try to avoid this thin area right here. It ends right about where the hole is. So my next set will start on this side of it, and that will take this thin area out of play. So you need to make allowances for all the sets of holes, and then for the types of skin anomalies that you encounter. So you're not going to have perfect sets of holes all the time. You have to work with it a little bit. You have to put them in where you can and make it as symmetrical as possible. So we're gonna now punch the last remaining 2 sets of holes. And originally this would have been one of the 8 that came between the cross. We did a cross here, and then we did another cross between, and these were the cross between. So we're going to measure out the distance so we can make 2 sets, and we won't encounter this thin spot over here. So I have a 9/16. I wanted something a 1/2 inch or a little bit bigger. So that's why I'm using a 9/16 punch. And normally I like to come in at least an inch or just a little less inside with my sets of holes as we go around. That'll give you plenty of tug when you put the lace through and then it pulls on the hide. You'll have plenty of rawhide for it to grab onto. So we'll make sure that we're about a finger's length up. And then we'll punch our hole. And then again, keeping to that same rule, we want at least about a 1/2 inch between the hole. So we're about a finger length up, which is about a little more than 1/2 inch, and a finger length between the holes. And you can use any kind of measure you want. This just works best for me because they're natural tools. So that's about a uniform distance. Now from here, I just go the middle between these two because there's no anomalies on either side. So I'll try to hit the exact middle and punch the last set of holes. Again, about a finger length up and one between. And there we go. Now we have both heads are ready to tie, and normally at this point is where you would make the determination if you're going to cut out the pleats between the sets of holes. On this drum, because the hide is thick enough, I determined that I didn't want to do that just yet. So, and I may not, because it has enough sets and it's covering enough area that by the time we put the lace through and start cinching it up on the drum, there may not be that much gather that would make a pleat. So we're going to determine that after the drum is tied. And from here, we're going to go to the drum frame and we're going to do the finishing touch on the drum frame, and then we'll be ready to tie our drum. Like I said, I've already taken the piece of skin that has been left over after we cut the hide, and I cut it into lace about an inch to just a little over an inch. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and put the finishing touches on the rim, and we'll go ahead and we'll tie the big drum heads on the drum. Okay, we are back inside from dealing with our rawhide. We have it cut and we have it punched. So now we're ready to talk about the rim. The rim that we are using is a 28 by 12 inch deep by 28 inch across, a powwow drum. And for this drum, I decided to use a light color because it's going to be used in a hot environment. So that's the reason why it's white. What I have done is, in getting it prepared, the shell itself came just raw, so I needed to take two 28-inch inner reinforcement hoops to reinforce, because we're going to put a moderately thick cowhide natural on this. So it's going to create an exertion force in and down to kind of scrunch it. And that's where we're going to get the tightness. So we need reinforcement. In this case, I did 2 reinforcement rings on either end, and I went and bought some local hardware at the local hardware store, and I bought these wooden stakes that will reinforce where the hoops are for the rope on the outside, because we're going to make a stand for this, and we'll show that a little later, and we're going to swing it on a stand. And the only thing I've done to the inside is to coat it with a light urethane spray. And again, I painted the outside white in getting it ready. And there's one last thing that we're going to do before we actually tie the drum, and that is to put a humidity hole in the drum. And it'll be over here opposite where the seams aren't, and the seams come together here and here for the rim, for the reinforcement rings. So we want to make sure that it's all balanced, and we want to make sure that everything's good before we use it. The glue has set up, the paint is dry, and the urethane coat on the inside is just right. So now we are ready to do the last and final measure to get our rim ready, and we have our hides ready. So we're now ready to tie our 28-inch drum. We will drill the humidity hole, that will be the last thing, and then we'll start to lace up our drum. Okay, now we are ready to tie our drum. We have our rawhide lace cut, and we've had it soaking in cold water, just like our drum faces. We now have them punched, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually start tying the drum, and we're going to do the simple tie the way that we did the smaller drum. Just here we're doing it in a larger form factor. So we're gonna go start with a thick set of eye holes where the leather is kind of thick. You don't want to start where it's thin, otherwise you exert a lot of pressure on that side. So we're going to start here where it's thick, and then we're going to proceed around the drum, and then we're going to go back around and hit all the sets that we missed and make our little cross. And then after we do that, we're going to start to tighten the drum before we tie it off. And then after we get that done, then we will evaluate it once we get it all drum tight, and we'll see what adjustments we need to make from there. So that's what we're doing. Here's the end, and I've made sure and detangled all the rest of the hide. So our lace is ready to go, and we're ready to start lacing up the big drum. And it starts off pretty easy when your lace is nice and wet. But what happens is, as it goes through the holes actually wring out the water. So in the beginning it's kind of nice, so you want to just keep working with it, and don't keep track of your beginning, otherwise you're going to make a knot. And keep pulling the lace through. And at this point we don't want to tighten it at all. And it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of water, that's fine. We want to keep it nice and loose. So we're going to go in through the facing side, like through every other set of holes. And then we're going to go around this way, and then as we get to the other side, we're going to come around and turn and go back the other way. I've actually cut more lace than I actually need for this job. So once I go around and get all the holes laced, I'll make a little bit so we can tie off, and then I'll just cut the rest of the lace and save it for another drum. When you start the drum in one direction and going through the holes one way, you don't want to mix it up and go the other way. You're not going to get the uniformity of the drum. So for now, we're just going to keep the lace untwisted as much as we can and loose. And this is how we start it. Kind of seems like as you go along, you don't know what it's going to look like, you don't know what it's going to sound like, but if you kind of adhere to the drum making principles, you should do okay. You'll get a nice, good sound out of your drum. So don't get in a hurry with it, and be real patient. It takes it a little while to come together. We've gone around the drum once, and it looks about even. I need to make a couple of adjustments here. So now we're going to turn the lace around and go back and hit all the sets of holes that we missed on the first time. Again, we're going to keep it nice and loose, and we're just going to have enough lace left over to where we can tie off the drum once we have it tight. Okay, we've got our lace all the way around the drum one time, and we're actually starting at this point, and we're going this way. And now that we've come all the way around the drum this way, we've come through these holes, we're going to come straight up and come through this hole, and then we're going to go back and get the sets the other way, making kind of a cross pattern as we go through the drum. And we're going to take up a little bit more slack out of the lace. We're not really going to tighten it, we're just going to put a little more pressure on it so it pulls the drum head a little bit more. In fact, we may need to, I don't know why, but this dark area likes to. And again, we have cut a lot of lace here, but it's better to have more than not enough, because you don't have, by the time you get through tying the drum, you won't have enough time to soak hide, recut lace, and so it's a real bummer when that happens. So we're going to go through, making sure our lace is not tangled, and we're going to go back the other way. Okay, this is the lace that we have started with, and this is the lace that we ended with. And when we came around the first time, we ended up just going straight up and then turning around and going back. And we ended up here, so we want to take where we finished and where we started and put them together. So what I did was I bent it over and I made a cut with my scissors to make a hole in our beginning lace, and I'll thread it through where we went up and down, and that'll make the final cross as we take the lace that we ended up with and we put it through the hole in the lace. And then that is how we'll tie off the drum, and that makes the final cross. Okay, now we're ready to tie off the drum. We've gone around a couple of times and tightened it up. And I could tighten it up a little bit more, but there's a little bit of stress on the thinner eyelets. So I don't want to tighten any more until I know that they're that they're going to hold. So right now is about tight enough, and the heads will tighten up as they dry. So we're ready to take the beginning piece and the end piece. We've looped through it, and what we're going to do is just tie a couple of slip knots to reinforce that. Going through that cross, and now we're going to go under and do another slip knot. And with this end piece, I'm going to tuck it back under. And there we have our knot. Now we've tied our 28-inch powwow drum, and we have tightened it up and put our final knot in it. We are not through with it yet. We've still got to do we still got to do the stand for it, and we still have to make sure that it doesn't untie and that the tension remains nice and tight as it dries. So this is how to do the tying of that. And again, I reiterate, you need to, keep watching it, and you need to put more attention into it, making sure that the eyelets hold and that they're not going to pull out and break. If it does, it's kind of a bummer. We're going to have to start all over. Okay, we have finished tying our 28-inch powwow drum, and we've got it nice and tight. We've knotted it off. We've done everything that we needed to do to it at this point. We need to keep watching it, but we have put it all together. In the next episode, we will explore making a stand for this drum, and I'll go through the steps and show you those. It has been wonderful making this drum. Thank you for watching. This is Shawn Littlebear. Ha ho.